Hello and welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. I've got a treat for you today. I've got a Celtic icon, a Celtic great, a man who needs no introduction, though I'll try my best anyway. He won 7 trophies as a Celtic manager. He brought the club and the supporters on some magical European journeys, and he worked with some of the biggest and best Celtic players of our lifetimes. It is, of course, Mr. Martin O'Neill. Martin, first of all, thanks very much for joining me. Thanks for your time and giving up your time to do this. How are
No
you on this
problem.
fine day?
Yeah, and you're talking about a fine day. Yeah, weather's been terrific for quite some considerable time now. How is it there? Is it okay?
It's beautiful up here as well. I don't think it'll be quite as good weather for the Scottish Cup final, but it has been glorious for the last couple of weeks up here too. So
Oh,
we're certainly enjoying the
is that the
summer.
forecast then? Is that
I
the
think it
forecast?
is. The last time I checked, it seems to be changeable. You know what Glasgow's like, Martin,
Yeah,
but it seems to be changeable. So we'll see how it all pans out.
yeah.
Um, yeah, Martin, I want to pick your brains on a few things today, Celtic related.
Hmm.
Anyone who knows me will know how much of a joy it is for me to be speaking to you today. The Martin O'Neill years, as people like to say, were formative for me in my Celtic sporting lifetime. I grew up as a young boy around the Tommy Burns team,
Yeah.
and I feel like the Tommy Burns era kind of taught me a lot about Celtic in terms of success but also failure. The Martin O'Neill era, I would say, taught me the potential of Celtic in terms of like trophy success, dominance, and the club's place in Europe. 25 years on, it's been that long, Martin. Do you feel that legacy, and how do you reflect on perhaps ushering in a new era that the reverberations are still felt at Celtic today?
That's really pleasing to hear, and I suppose yes. It's an interesting one really because when I came to the football club, as you mentioned, 25 years ago, I know it was a bit of a struggle for the club at the time. It had been dominated by Rangers for some time. Now, did I think then that you just wave the old magical wand and everything will turn in your favour? Absolutely not. Didn't think that Rangers were pretty strong. But a couple of things, John. I think that obviously wanting to try and do well for the football club, that's the driving force, I suppose, for a start. And let's be selfish about it, do well for yourself,
Mm,
because, I suppose one runs with the other. But I thought, I thought the team, having watched a couple of the videos from the previous season, even some of the games in which they did well, still probably lacked a little bit of confidence. Some good players, and I inherited some really good players. And then I think was had the ability to bring in some players. Mark Viduka was leaving immediately, and that was a blow. I didn't want him to leave the football club, but he had fallen out totally with it, and with people within the football club. Okay, so fine. So where do we find the replacement for Mark Viduka, which would be quite difficult? So we turned the money over onto Chris Sutton and Chris and Henrik. I started off a fantastic relationship, partnership, call it what you want, and one dovetailed with the other, and they were absolutely terrific. But then you have to give them some sort of service, things like this here. So you have Didier Agat, you bring in Alan Thompson, strengthen a wee bit at the back with Jos Valgaeren, and then you have Johan Mjalby at the football club. So and then you've got a really great captain and Paul Lambert, young fellow like Stilian Petrov, a rejuvenated Bobby Petta, things like this here. So it kind of worked, for us, um, and obviously important for me maybe to get off to a decent start so that messages in the dressing room can be listened to, I think, as much as anything else, rather than just you know a lot of I'm going to make up a word here, drabble or something like this. So yeah, but if you're asking me about the time there, absolutely loved it. It was fantastic, really, really fantastic, and it felt as if it seriously felt as if I was at the football club about 15 minutes.
yeah. I mean, I swapped season tickets in the years prior to that. Your first season there was actually the first year I owned a season ticket in my name. And I
Mm,
remember that summer there being a real sense of change at Celtic, and part of the reason I think people all recall your time at Celtic so fondly, aside from the sense, is that kind of emotional connection you had with the Celtic supporters. It was almost immediate, man, and it's also been like a hallmark of even managers like Ange Postecoglou, who you would deem as perhaps an outsider to the Celtic thing, but he also built that emotional connection with supporters. How important is that when you're coming to a club and trying to enact change and bring success, to have that kind of bond between a support and the team.
Right. Okay. I think every football club in existence has some sort of bond with whoever supports them. That's really as simple as this here. And I think if you step in at a football club as a manager, a director, something like this here, I think that you have to see that, and you have to try and adhere to it, and you have to kind of feel it. But what I'm saying is that not every football club is Celtic Football Club. And what I learned pretty early on from it, it is actually everything to the football. Sorry, to the supporter. And I went to John Robertson and John, my assistant manager. I would say about 8 or 9 weeks, maybe a wee bit longer into my tenure at the football club, and we went to Perth for an evening. We were playing on the Sunday, and John and I went to a supporters club meeting. In fact, it was their little shindig, I think, as much as anything else. And we went on the Saturday night, just poke our heads around the corner, just say that you're there. Slight presentation of something, I believe, but it was, I think, then just that group of people. You're talking about maybe less than 200 people, all possessing a season ticket. Absolutely, and this was it, and I kind of, I think when we got out of it and drove to where my team were staying for the night the night before the game on the Sunday, I think that's when it really was brought home to it. It was only a group of 200 people, but in Perth, where you felt this meant everything to them, the football club. That's kind of a bit scary at the same time, you want, and it's really emotional. And Celtic Football Club is driven on emotion. It really is, and it doesn't matter who's in charge of the football club. It is. Sometimes it wanes. Sometimes it's. So I mean, I'm sure that there were phenomenal days at the football club in the 50s, maybe in its inception, Brother Walford, things like this here. But you kind of feel that Jock Stein and his merry men brought the thing together. And I think this is what the club, because of that history, because of the first British side ever to win the European Cup, and what Celtic football teams should aspire to every single season they start off. And that was it. You might never get there. As Martin Luther King always said, you might never get there, but at the end of it, what a silly comparison, but you know what I'm talking about, football and Martin Luther King. But what I'm talking about is that, you must strive for that. And this is it. And now, just strangely enough, I think Celtic's little run in European football last year, Champions League football, where they felt as if they could compete. Not saying Dortmund was a kind of a wake-up call. I think there's 2 results after that there were terrific, particularly in Atalanta, I thought were terrific. And then to play so well against Bayern Munich in Munich was actually defining, I think, hopefully, and augurs great for next season.
Martin, when you were the Celtic manager, trebles were a rarity. They were, achieved in the Jock Stein years, as you alluded to there. They're now won with some regularity. How important was that first treble to you, and the team? Did you feel that sense of history in the moment at the time, and did you try and tap into that, into the build-up to, a Scottish Cup final to clinch that treble? What was the kind of vibe in the build-up?
That's a really good point, Joe. I suppose, really, I during the course of the season hadn't really thought about it. We played Kilmarnock in the League Cup final. I think that was the time that Sutton got himself sent off, and the game's still in the balance. I've never forgiven him for that since. Oh, well, I have actually, but just to get that first trophy in the board, and of course, we were doing very, very strongly in the league. So you felt as if, and I think getting a trophy on board, as Sir Alex Ferguson's always said, gives you a bit of power, gives you a bit more stamina, gives you a wee bit of momentum as well too. And I think that was driving us on for the last couple of months of the season. But I think you're right, John. I think stepping into the cup final, when it's so close to you, so the treble so close to you, it's so tangible. I think that's probably the time they felt a little bit of pressure. Really, this is it. We're one step away from completing this. And as I said, it was the first time done since the immortal Jock Stein. So yes, I probably did. If memory serves me correctly, I probably did. But then I was nervous for most games anyway, so it didn't really make any difference in that sense. But it was fantastic when it happened. Now, so so it is. Yes, there are regular occurrences now, but I felt that having done it against a really, really, really strong Rangers side was terrific, really, in that sense, to go and do it, and yeah, a great sense of pride, obviously, and something that the supporters loved at the same time.
Just reflecting on some of the players you worked with, you say there you inherited some great players, obviously Henrik Larsson, but you also signed players. How did you kind of assess the squad in those early days? And because you signed quite a lot of players in that first season, did you feel like there needed like a new influx of people who would be buying into your way of thinking? Was that the kind of idea with building that squad? And when you first assess a character like Henrik Larsson, did you know immediately what you had there and the magic that you had there that you would go on to achieve with him as well?
Well, again, it's a really good point you make. So sometimes you make I mean, my record in the last couple of years at Leicester City in terms of signing players was really, really strong, and players had come to the fore, like Muzzy Izzet, like Robbie Savage did brilliantly for us, but particularly Neil Lennon I signed, and so I felt confident about the signing of players. But to sign Neil Lennon to Celtic didn't take. It took some time to complete, about 3 or 4 months, in all honesty. But not to put an idea of into someone's head about signing for Celtic. Neil Lennon knew all about Celtic. Some of the boys in England, Chris Sutton, Alan Thompson, for instance, would have known about Celtic, but wouldn't have known about just the depth of feeling that people had for the football club and the diaspora of it as well too. So I think those things were big for the players you're signing. But you're hoping that I knew that they're good players. It's just a matter of settling down. And sometimes you make don't necessarily a judgment. It took me a little bit of time to realise Jackie McNamara was a really good player. I thought Jackie had lots and lots of qualities, and in fact, sometimes came on as a sub in matches, and where he could easily have started the game. But Jackie had, honestly, really, really good ability, and he was the quiet assassin. He looked like a 5-year-old, to tell you the truth, and what brilliant player. So, as I say, I inherited some good players who had lost a bit of confidence along the way. The season before, he lost by 20 points, and almost inevitably you're going to lose confidence from that. And Rangers having the upper hand, and signing some good players to supplement it. So from that viewpoint, and getting them to jail, I think that essentially is what management is. Well, one of the elements of management, anyway.
Yeah, a lot of people ask you, Martin, about your past at Celtic and the teams of Celtic before. I'm actually keen to get your sense of where Celtic sit now and where Celtic go in the future and what their place is in Europe now. You kind of alluded to there and the result and the performance in Atalanta, but European football's changing. As an observer of the game in general, how do you think it's changing? Is European football going to become more prominent over the next 5 to 10 years? And where's Celtic's place in that, do you feel?
Well, first of all, there's positives and negatives as far as I'm concerned. It's just my opinion. Mm-hmm. First of all, I think that the new format, and I felt the old format of the Champions League was really tired, because the top two teams almost inevitably could maybe mess up a game or two, but overall they're going to qualify because they're stronger than the third and fourth seeds. Generally, sometimes people get into a second seed in the years, and the third third-tier team might be every bit as strong as them. But generally speaking, those teams are getting through. So, and the format certainly suited a club like Celtic at this particular time, because you have matches against teams that you can win. You can beat Bratislava. You can beat Young Boys Bern, and you've got both of them at home. Not that 6 points are ever guaranteed anywhere along the way, John. They're never. No. But you've got a good chance of getting some points in the board. Points in the board give you give you that impetus for a start, and Bratislava being the opening game, suddenly, one match in, you're 3 points in the board. And then it gives you a wee bit of confidence. And no major setback against Dortmund, then the fight back against Atalanta, the 0-0 draw, then that great win against Leipzig. But what I'm talking about, there's competitions going on. We now have a third tier competition called the Conference League. And I jokingly have said, and kind of sarkily have said, that if you avoid relegation now in whatever league you're in, you'll play in Europe. Europe was what you aspire to, either the Champions League or, in my day, the European Cup, and if not, there was the UEFA Cup, and I suppose when I was starting off in football, a thing called the European Cup Winners' Cup. So any team who's won their FA Cup, as it were, gets into that competition. So, but in latter years, you're talking about the two competitions, Champions League and UEFA Cup. Now you've invented another competition, and I don't see the point. I really don't see the point, because you are talking now, for instance, five teams from England will qualify down the league positions for next year's Champions League. 5 teams. And then, but now Tottenham Hotspur, having won, they go into the Champions League. I don't know whether they play a qualifying game. They might do, but even so. So, I mean, I don't know. It's a lot of teams, and where's it going? So you can qualify for the. It's certainly in England. I think you can qualify for the Conference League, as it were, if you finish 9th or something, I guess, here, or 8th or 9th. And I think that's taking away a wee bit from you. You want European football to be exactly that, for fans to go to something, really enjoy, a bit of traveling, coming to a new city or something like this, but try with the expectation of trying to win the game. And it's nice for people to visit, but I just think it's lost the essence of the competition of European football. It used to be, Champions League is still the highest point in that aspect, but I just think it's been diminished somewhat in recent times.
And do you see UEFA further kind of watering down like the competitions, and perhaps introducing new fixtures, in the coming years? Like, they've got this format that's 8 games. There's scope to expand that and kind of make European football a more week-to-week norm. That's kind of the way I see it going. I don't know about yourself, but it's just
honestly, you may well be right. You may well be right about that there. Then, but the European League is not something that is just cropping up now or whatever. They've been talking about it now for 25 years. And I mean, that breakaway league was nearly getting itself into existence as well too. So I don't know. I'm personally speaking, I think the Champions League is still a great competition to be involved in. So is the Europa League. Used to be the UEFA Cup. I think that's fine, but I think that's plenty of competitions for club European football in that sense. And you talk about burnout as well too for players.
Yeah.
And I know Chelsea have been able to contest this particular competition by playing a lot of lads who wouldn't play in league form. But not every single side can afford that luxury. And and when I was at Aston Villa, for instance, trying to prioritise getting into the Champions League, which was really important and the high point of a football club season, and balancing that in the what we were called the Europa League, really, when you're in the final 32 of that. And you don't have the size of squad to cope with it, then you're starting to prioritise. And my priority at that time, and I took some criticism from it, was trying to get into the Champions League.
Europe always feels like the benchmark for Celtic now, and I think those expectations started creeping into the wider sport back when you were managers, just some of the occasions and the nights, and obviously the UEFA Cup journey that you took Celtic on. Celtic remains, Europe remains the benchmark for Celtic. That's when, as I was kind of alluding to at the start, that's when you see the full power and potential of Celtic on those big European nights.
I'm totally with you. Absolutely right. And that's gone back again to 1967. That's the benchmark for this football club. Absolutely. And whatever way you want to what I say, bolster or whatever it is, that is exactly it. It's that. And I know that there's a lot of differences taking place in football now. Some football clubs who have owners who have got absolute fortunes. Did I think that Manchester City, for instance, a way back, even as late as 1996, 97, 98, something like this here, would they be a dominant force in European football? I probably didn't see it. Alex Ferguson used to say noisy neighbours or something like this here, but whatever it was. Did I see some of the changes that have taken place in the last 10 years? Never mind anything else. Maybe didn't even see that. But it is, so the game has changed. Celtic, of course, your problem with it, I think, and while Celtic have done well financially by getting into the competition and doing well, there's in the SPL itself, there's not the money attached to it. So trying to strengthen your team with, I mean, lots of players want to play for Celtic. Don't get me wrong, and would love to play in the Champions League, and that's a really big pull. There's no question about it. But can you go out and afford to spend £35 million on a player or something like
Yeah.
this here, who might be on the periphery of a Chelsea or I was really going to say Manchester United, but they're playing so wretchedly now at the minute that. But the point I'm trying to make, anyway, or
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
of
I'm trying to
course,
make.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not in great favour, certainly of the Conference League itself, and I just think that sometimes European football has been a bit diluted because of UEFA introducing a third competition.
Just finally, Marin, just one last thing. How are you enjoying this phase of your life where you are reflecting on all your footballing career and your time at Celtic? And I know you've got events with the club next month, and you're always chatting, about your memories of Celtic. How do you enjoy reflecting and speaking about your time at Celtic so much?
That's a good point, John. I do when I get to a little function, I actually enjoy the rapport with the supporters, and they're great, and they're always very very pleasant to me. And I am not. I'm not the man they think I am. I'm not. I'm really. I'm well. What shall I say again? I'm. I yeah. I have. I would only say about. I would say that I would have about maybe about 10,000 weaknesses. Pretty well close to it anyway. And so, yeah, I suppose the best way for me to try and sum it up is that I had a fantastic time. It was a real honour. I know that my father used to say, "Son, if you ever get a chance to play for Celtic, and then do so." Well, I did get this opportunity because when I was playing for Distillery, I think it was Jock Stein sent over a scout, and I played so wretchedly they never came back again. So that opportunity to play for Celtic disappeared quite quickly. But the opportunity to manage the football club, when I was loving it at Leicester City after a really torrid start, loving my time at Leicester City, we'd been successful, but the lure of Celtic was very strong. And I obviously there were a number of big contenders in for the job, boys with big names in at that time. So I've got a lot to thank Dermot Desmond for choosing me, because he didn't really know me. I know he might looked at the record. Well, we didn't know each other in that aspect, but he took the risk with somebody. Perhaps maybe he saw that maybe me being Irish and having that Celtic connection, as you talked about early on, maybe he thought that would be something. I don't know. But so I have a lot to thank him for, because at the end of the day, I wouldn't have got that opportunity if he had not made the decision, or at least forced the board to make that decision. I'm hoping that the board, including Mr. Quinn and all those, were all in favour of it, but one never knows these days. But anyway, so from the year 2000 right up until I left in in 2005, and I wouldn't have left at all had my wife not had an illness. But that doesn't mean that Celtic wouldn't have got fed up with me, of course. At some stage or another, John, honestly, you would have been, I can imagine if you'd renewed your season ticket just around about the time I started, you'd have been throwing it onto the pitch then and discussed it about 2007 if I had survived that long. So anyway, so I had a great time. I really missed the game. Absolutely missed the game, and I don't mind admitting it. And I don't like. I come up. I've got this function in June. Celtic asked me about it because it was 25 years since, and I think after that, I think maybe have one more function, and I think I'll honestly give it a rest because I think that Celtic fans would be actually kind of now fed up seeing me up there, So I think that's it. So I'll try and give it a rest. I don't know how long left I have on this earth, but I'll give it a rest for a while anyway, and see how things go. This is not being morbid. Sorry, John. This is me. Actually,
no, of course.
This is me being actually upbeat. So if you think this is upbeat, you can imagine what morbidity is like. But anyway, I love my time. It's really, really terrific. And it's nice after 25 years for fans to actually think, yeah, listen, I think it might be too strong to say you started it all. But I think if you're talking about seminal moments, I think us beating Rangers 6-2 give us the confidence to continue on. And because of some of the goals that were scored that day and the manner in which we won, I suppose right enough it was. I didn't realise for some time, but how important that was, because had Rangers come over to Celtic and wipe the floor with us, then you're talking about another really disappointing season, perhaps. So maybe that game had a massive effect, not only on the team but on the supporters as well.
I would agree with that. Listen, Martin, I could speak to you for another 3 hours, but we're going to have to cut our time short there. Martin's speaking to us as part of the offer we have on the Celtic Way right now. If you can get 6 months of subscription access to celticway.co.uk for a quiz, and you get put into the hat for a competition to win a lunch with Martin O'Neill. And I'm sure you've got plenty more stories and chat about your time at Celtic that you could offer a lucky winner there. Martin, again, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate you giving up your time. And
absolutely, no, not at all. I apologise for keeping you waiting up there. Traffic is a major problem, but absolutely not at all. Privilege was all mine.